Please help me welcome Greg Eow, President of CRL, as he presents his report on the state of the consortium. Thank you, Greg.
Oh, thank you, Adrienne. Thank you, Adrienne. Thank you, everyone, for taking time out of your busy schedules to spend some time with CRL and to engage in this important governance work. I hope you're having a good day, wherever you're tuning in from. It is a gorgeous day here in Chicago. And the board of directors are together here, almost all of us, yesterday and today, really working together to build a community-based governance structure to lead this incredible organization. This is my 4th annual meeting, and I am painfully aware of the fact that we have yet to do one in person, and COVID played a big part of that. But 1 year from now, April 2024, we are all going to gather here in Chicago together to celebrate all of the structural transformative changes we have made over the last couple of years to situate this organization for lasting success. Now, I've always thought of my time at CRL in terms of a 5-year block. But that's not because that's an important time frame for me. It's because that 5-year block is important for CRL. Adrienne and I both started in 2019. That was the 70th anniversary of CRL, 70 years of demonstrated success in collective action. A lot of folks say collective action in the nonprofit sector can't work. CRL has worked for 70 years. And so when I came in 2019, I thought about what could we do, what needed to be done to situate CRL structurally between its 70th anniversary and its 75th anniversary, my 5-year timeline, to be a thriving organization for the next 75 years. We have been doing transformative work to really make CRL strong inside out, so that when we gather together next year, a year from now, we can all celebrate the accomplishments of that restructuring and really, really take joy in CRL entering a growth trajectory. It is an incredible organization, and we are doing great work, and I look forward to celebrating that with everyone a year from now. Why am I so passionate about CRL? It's an incredible organization, but what does that look like and what does that mean? Next slide, please. What is CRL exactly? There are so many different organizations out there claiming our time and attention, but what is it about CRL that gets me so passionate about and makes our time together so important for research libraries, for scholarship, for knowledge? Next slide. CRL is a place. It is a large research facility on the south side of Chicago on the University of Chicago campus. It is a physical operation, a operational research library. It is a collective collection, a cooperatively built collective collection built over 70 years of collaboration across the research library community, across the United States and across Canada. We are a binational organization. We are Canadian as much as US. That is incredible. Demonstrated success that cooperative collection building works. And third, it's an association, it's a community. What we're taking part in today, this governance activity, is the governance work of an association like ACRL or ARL or the American Historical Association. An association governance structure makes sure that an organization is aligned, is governed by the people that contribute to it. We're a cooperative. We're not a vendor. We're not even a nonprofit with a vendor service model. We're a co-op. It's incredible testimony to the fact that collective action can work. And that's why I am all in and doing everything I can to make sure this organization is structured to thrive for the next 75 years. Okay, so when I arrived in 2019, what was the leadership challenge? What was the leadership challenge? So I have enormous respect for Bernie Riley, my predecessor, and Bernie is still here in Chicago, and we met pretty much every month during my first year, and he really gave me a lot of advice and to give me, a lot of context. And what Bernie said to me when I arrived was that when he arrived, CRL needed scale. In fact, to quote Bernie, he said, CRL needed scale badly. And Bernie's right. CRL, the value proposition is that it is a network level collaboration. The benefit is scale. It's projects and activity, collective action at scale. If we're not scaling our collective power to address collective challenges, then we're not doing our job. So Bernie was right. We need to scale, need scale. And during Bernie's tenure, he was scaling. So you could see all sorts of acquisitions, if you will. So Neural coming into CRL, the global resource network programs, really enlarging the suite of global collections programs that we have, that coming to CRL. A number of new partnerships like the Linda Hall Library. So really building partnerships and programs to get that scale, right? And I think that was a good move, and it's given us a lot of great stuff to work with. But the leadership challenge for me, right, is to how do you actually weave a through line? How do you weave all of these disparate programs into a single value proposition? This is what CRL does. This is what CRL membership, this is what the ROI is. How do you make all of these different programs work administratively? And that's been the real challenge now. So we've been aligned on strategy. We are here to have the research libraries collectively build collections for the benefit of scholarship. Strategy has always been the same. But we've been acquiring more and more pieces to make that active. But what we need to do now is to build an administrative structure and clarity around all these disparate activities so we can speak with a single voice, scale all these activities. So let me run through some of the feedback I got when I started in 2019 to capture this need to administer the scale. Next slide, please. Next slide. So Alondra Nelson was a board member when I arrived. She then went to the Office of Science and Technology and Policy and released that famous Nelson report earlier this year. Now I think she's back at Princeton. But Alondra Nelson was a fantastically engaged board member when I arrived. And what Alondra told me was, CRL is trans-regional. Put the archives together. Start connecting the archives. Build these things together, through lines. Dale Askey, who's now on the board, he was a CRL library dean in 2019, but he told me in 2019, we need a program, not projects. We have 1,000 points of light, but we need a sun. CRL needs to be scale. There are projects everywhere, but how do we build a sun, a program, scale? And then third, when I was doing a listening tour of CRL staff when I arrived, one quote that really stood out for me was the staff perception that our work is filled with a cloud of unrelated tasks. That's how it feels, right? So there was a lot of activities and programs that had come to CRL, good programs, but we didn't have an organizational structure or administrative structure. Or we needed to weave them all together into a program so we could have a sun, not 1,000 points of light, if you will. So my plan, my strategic plan, my efforts was this. Next slide, please. So breaking down that 5-year time frame, 2019 to 2024, right? CRL's 70th anniversary to 75th anniversary. How do we situate CRL for long-term success? And phase one was strengthen the core, right? Anything we want to do in terms of projects or programs, they're not going to be successful if they're not built on a strong foundation. So making sure the facility was in good repair, making sure we had a good organizational culture and expertise on staff, really, really focusing on the back end operations so that we had a strong foundation on which to build all of our aspirations. Phase two, strengthening the consortia. So that's not so much core, but it's the governance, bylaws, committee structures, but really making sure that the consortia was structured in a way to be successful. And then phase three would be strengthening the community. We all know we want CRL to be changing the scholarly communications ecosystem. So how can we play that role to have maximum impact on changing the evolving ScholComm landscape? So phase one, let's have a strong foundation. Phase two, let's make sure we have a strong governance structure and committees to really activate the governance. And then phase three, well, sky's the limit on phase three, as long as we have a strong core and a strong governance structure. So next slide, please. So this breaks us down with a little bit more detail and puts a time frame on it. So 2019 to 2022, my first 3 years, really heads down, focused on internal operations so we could have a strong core. So the facility really needed some work. really addressing the weaknesses in the facility, really working on organizational climate and really building a solid team internally, and remaking top to bottom our finances and our accounting departments. Complete overhaul of our staffing and expertise and all of our financial mechanisms. I'll talk about that in more detail because I know that renovation project, although necessary, caused some operational impacts for y'all. And I want to acknowledge that and I want to own that decision, but we had to renovate the kitchen while we had dinner party. But we had to do that to position us for long-term success. But I want to own that. That's on me. So phase 2, where we are now, 2023. This is where you're going to hear a lot about governance, and governance is maybe not anyone's idea of a topic they want to talk about, but it sort of is everything. It's the operating system that lets all of our programming and everything come together, and our bylaws really are in need for a top to bottom review. And so we really need to get that operating system up and running, really need to modernize our bylaws. We also need to have a formalized mission, vision, and values. Different committees have been working on this over the last year. And we also need to do a stronger job of supporting and empowering our hosted programs. And we're going to talk a lot more about that. Phase 3, I'm not going to get too much into because that's past my 5-year tenure. But the phase 3 is everything we could be doing, all the different projects that we could be taking on once we've gotten through phase 1 and phase 2. All right, so phase 1, quick overview of next slide, please. So phase 1, so really investing in a strong foundation, facilities and infrastructure, talent development, HR, and then really working on our accounting and financial expertise, top to bottom. Now, the challenge for the facilities is that we had high levels of deferred maintenance, but the opportunity was to remake the facility. The challenge in talent development is that we really needed to have an organizational culture that really gave staff the chance to grow and learn and outgrow their positions and get into new positions and move on to other positions, really have dynamism. And we really have been doing a lot of work on that. And then business intelligence, I'll talk about that, but we complete top to bottom remaking our accounting teams. Next slide. So facilities, we made huge progress in the last year. We have new windows, new carpets, new break room. And last summer, we completed a long overdue complete replacement of the CRL roof. It was probably 20 years overdue. You deserve to know as members that during my first couple of years, if we had a heavy rain day, I had a little bit of a white knuckle moment because we had leaks on the roof, but that is solved. But we're not out of the woods with the facility. We're a large concrete building, and the concrete hasn't been sealed. I understand from our facilities lead that the best practices is that the concrete gets resealed every 3 to 5 years. We haven't done it since the building's been built. And so the concrete needs to be sealed so that we can supply a responsible preservation environment for our collections. This has to be done, and that's reflected in the budget proposal. We really need to do that. It's long overdue. The other thing that we have yet to complete is modernizing CRL's internal telecommunications environment. One of the reasons why we're doing this event here, and one of the reasons why I'll be doing my keynote tomorrow, not in the facility, is that we do not have a modern telecommunications infrastructure in the building. And we expect a lot from CRL staff, and the CRL staff expect a lot from themselves, and they do not have stable internet connections. So that's reflected in the budget proposal. We need that to do our job. That's just foundational. But we have done a lot of work on the facility. We're not out of the woods, but we have light at the end of the tunnel. Next slide, please. That's our facility. We want more people to come visit. So it's actually a very happy place, which I'll get to with metrics. Next slide, please. Let's talk about talent management. Let's talk about HR. Let's talk about staff. Let's talk about the staff that make this whole thing operate from the ground up. Now, during COVID, most organizations have had about 50% attrition and turnover in the last few years. And CRL is no different. And then when you put that into a context of thoroughgoing restructuring and change at CRL, that really adds another flavor, another complication to this context that we're all navigating. So one of the things that we've been thinking about is morale, staff morale. How are the staff doing? And so in January and February of this year, we benchmarked it, wanted to get some numbers on it, get some metrics on it. So we did a organizational climate survey to get metrics on staff morale. Next slide, please. Now here's some survey demographics. You can see the breakdown of staff. You can see that the average employee has been at CRL for about 8.5 years and works on site and doesn't have management responsibilities. You can see that breakdown, tenure at CRL. You can see a breakdown between staff that have longer tenures, between staff that are more new to the organization. You can see the breakdown between folks that are working on-site, hybrid, and remote. And then you can also see the breakdown that majority of staff do not have supervisory responsibilities. But that's a quick snapshot of staff. And we're a little bit short staffed right now. The metric on that is when I arrived, we had 67 staff, and right now we have 38. So that's something else we want to capture in the budget proposal. But we're a lean staff in the midst of really heavy duty change management, some of it particular to CRL, some of it that we're all navigating. So how are the staff doing? Next slide, please. So the organizational climate benchmark was done on a 5-point Likert scale to gauge agreement to different questions. A strong disagree would be -2, neutral, 0, strong agree, +2, right? So simple Likert scale. Next slide. And we captured a number of different metrics. Alignment with mission and vision, right? Do I believe in the mission of the organization? Job satisfaction. Overall, am I happy with my job or not? Work environment and culture. Am I getting recognized? Is my success being celebrated? Next slide. Management communication. Is my manager giving enough attention and direction and communicating to me in ways that allows me to grow and be successful? People management. Do I feel culture? Do I feel comfortable asking questions of management? Benefits. Do I feel fairly compensated? Right. So we asked this question again along a number of different. Next slide. Using a Likert scale. So -2, strong disagree. 0, neutral. 2, strong agree. Actually, I agree. So next slide. So what we saw along these different metrics, alignment with mission and vision, job satisfaction, work culture, management communication, people management benefits, it was all positive. It was all better than neutral, right? So you can see a better than neutral, close to agreement above agreement on mission alignment with mission and values. We have a staff that really believe in the mission, which is awesome. We all do, right? It's a great mission, right? We're above agreement on job satisfaction. We are positive on work environment and culture, so positive side, but and then right down through the benefits. So a soft agreement on benefits. So given the degree of transformative change at CRL in the context of transformative change in COVID, I think this is extraordinary. Now we want to improve on this benchmark. We're not going to get complacent. We want to get better across the board on all these metrics. But given the changes, that is really a testament to the strength of the managers. Andrea Duns, Shanta Dorsey, Amy Wood. Now that I started listing names, I realize I shouldn't have because I'm going to forget people. Marie Waltz, but all of our managers are doing a phenomenal job, and this shows it. Next slide. This is an area where we're not doing as well as I'd like. We're not doing bad, and we're probably doing as well as average, but average isn't good enough for us. If you look at this job satisfaction between folks that are working fully remote, staff that are working hybrid, and staff that are working fully on site, we've got a gap here. One of the things that folks working on site realize is that internally, and Felicia, you've commented on this quite a bit over the last, during your first month, it's a genuinely happy place. It is staff working hard, growing, learning, collaborating, and you can see it on site. It's off the charts. The morale's really high. But with the staff that are working fully remote, that morale, that alignment isn't quite there. So we really need to think about how are we onboarding folks that are working remotely? How are we keeping them engaged? And we have some work to do there. And we're committed to doing that work because we are fully invested in our remote workers. They are all part of the team. But we have some work to do there, and we want to be real open about that. So next slide. Business intelligence. So I talked about remaking our capacity to bring financial intelligence to all of our strategic decision-making. This is something the board has wanted since I've arrived. Alexia Hudson-Ward's really advocated for that correctly, and the board really wants that. And the fact of the matter is our internal accounting operations and internal expertise, right down to, we're going to get real back of office. The accounting software system that we're using to handle all our finances, the ILS, if you will, for all of our financial work, was decades out of date. And so what we did was we actually brought in an outside team to bring a whole new level of expertise to come in, modernize our workflows, do a massive upgrade of our accounting software. And basically we renovated the entire kitchen while we had dinner guests in the home. And I know that was disruptive, but I can say this, we just closed Q3 results. And that has always been a challenge for us to close our quarterly results since I arrived. And the new team closed those results within a week and a half. So we are seeing real progress on that. And I know where the disruptions in our accounting workflow renovations, it's been most keenly felt in our global hosted programs. And we're meeting with all of the chairs of those groups as soon as this meeting's over with data to get them their budgets and get them operating back up in the air and flying after these disruptions. But look, folks, we've renovated the kitchen. We're going to be better for the long term for having done it. Okay, that was my call, and I don't want to minimize the disruptions. That was my call. Next slide, please. All right, so just a quick overview of strengthening the core. So facilities investment, we've made a lot of progress on that. We're not quite out of the woods, and you'll see some asks in the budget request to continue to finish out the suite of renovations. Talent development, we have really a strong culture. We need to do a little bit better on getting the fully remote folks part of the team and really getting the morale high. But we're running lean. We're running way too lean. We need to hire some positions, and that came through in the organizational climate survey too. We are running too lean. And then the business intelligence. We are not light at the end of the tunnel with our remaking of the accounting team. We are out of the tunnel as of closing that Q3 results. You did a great job, Andrea. Thank you. That's invisible labor, and you did a great job. Thank you. So next slide. All right, so just to recap, strengthening the core. It's been heads down, and we've been really building a strong foundation because this organization is extraordinary and invaluable. And we've built a strong core. Next phase, phase 2, 2023, we have to strengthen the consortia. And what do I mean by that? Next slide, please. Governance. So what is governance? You heard Felicia talk about it. We're going to be talking about governance a lot over the next couple of months. The board of directors is about to launch a governance task force to review our bylaws, create a governance manual. But what is governance? It sounds opaque. Maybe it sounds scary. This is the way I think about governance. Governance are like the operating system, right? Nobody wants to talk about an operating system until all your apps crash, all right? So let's think of an iPhone. You have hardware, like the CRL facility, right? You have the hardware. You need to have hardware, right? And then you have to have an operating system. That's governance, bylaws, rules of the game, committee structure. You need to have an operating system, and nobody really wants to pay attention to an operating system, but when it crashes, everybody knows. And our operating system is crashing. It is really dated. We need to optimize that operating system. And then when you think of our global programs, which are the core of what we do and have always done, think of those as apps that have grown in complexity and ambition and have aspirations that are awesome and we want to support, but have grown disconnected from the physical reality, the hardware limitations, which we're modernizing, and then the OS, the operating system. And so those apps keep crashing. So we're trying to gather everybody together to shape governance together so that we have total integrity from our internal facility and back of office operations to the operating system that guides all of our activities, all those disparate activities and programs that came to CRL, so that these apps that are going to grow in complexity and just get more innovative and complex and impactful, that they have a stable hardware platform and a stable operating system to empower their work. And right now that we haven't had that. So we've been crashing, but we need to come together and get this OS together. App developers are brought in with the OS developers early to shape the OS so that it meets their needs. That's what we're doing. Next slide. So I talked about the governance task force. The board is going to be launching a governance task force now that we have Felicia, on board to help lead that from the staff side. Bylaws review, committee review, appointment review, all this governance work that needs to be modernized. Really important. But I'll be talking, we'll be talking more today. The committees will be talking more today. I'll be talking at great length tomorrow. My head and my heart is with the global programs. And we need to do a much better job supporting our global programs. Let's talk a bit about that, because this is the most important thing in front of us for 2023, as I see it. Maybe I just revealed my own biases because the bylaws and governance is probably the most important thing. But, I am a collection person at heart, and my heart will always be with collections, and we need to support collections. So next slide, please. Our commitment to global collections. So we have been doing all of this renovation at the ground level, renovating the kitchen. I keep using that analogy. Now I'm talking about governance, and now I'm asking everybody to work on this operating system development. But folks don't want to be talking about back of office operations. People don't want to be talking about an operating system. They want to be growing programs, developing apps. And so some of these disruptions, as we build this integrity between hardware, OS, and the programs, that's been disruptive to some practices that have been going on. And so I just want to say, all of the disruptions have been with one goal in mind, and it's to support global collections at CRL. If CRL exists for any reason, it's to be building global collections as a community for the long term. That's CRL. And that's why I came as a collections person to be at CRL. That's what we do. Next slide, please. So here's a list of programs at CRL. And you can see we have a large number of programs. Remember, I talked about CRL needing scale and then acquiring lots of different programs and partnerships. And you can get a visualization of a number of the programs here. At the top there, we have the Cooperative Africana Materials Project, CAMP. CAMP has been part of CRL since 1964, a really proven collaborative effort of building Africana collections at the network level through collaboration of librarians from many different institutions. I was able to join the camp for their annual meeting in Nashville a couple of weeks ago, and there's so much expertise, scholarly expertise, collections expertise, commitment to building global partnerships and building global collections in a way that really builds an equitable global knowledge ecosystem. And I'm just talking about AMP, but what I said about CAMP goes for all of the different groups. I'll highlight the South Asia Open Archives, the SAWA. When I started at CRL back in 2019, I remember I was talking with David Magyar from Princeton, who I know from working as an AUL in Ivies Plus, and David said, Greg, do you support programs like open access programs like SAWA? And I said, absolutely. That's exactly what we should be doing. We should be serving as a platform for collections experts to get together and to build collections collaboratively that are open. Absolutely. SAWA it's great. So these programs are doing really innovative work. And there's so much goodwill and expertise in these groups that we really want to invest in the expertise and really give it an administrative structure, hardware, OS platform to really activate it at scale. Next slide, please. Actually, sorry, go back one. NERL. So one of the programs that came to CRL a decade ago was NERL. And NERL had this sort of ambiguous relationship with CRL. We couldn't quite figure out, is it independent? Is it not independent? And as we realized that, as a legal and fiscal reality, it was completely a part of CRL, but that wasn't built into our culture and our governance. And through our work with Educopia, we're able to bring together stakeholder groups and really get a shared understanding of what NERL is and what NERL wants to be. And after that work with Educopia, we have a new governance structure for NERL, completely harmonizes NERL's activities with CRL's governance and back of office operations. We have a new leader for NERL and combined CRL licensing, Lynette Garza, and NERL is on a path for huge success. It is an incredible community filled with experts working collaboratively, again, not as a vendor, but as a combined e-resources department, sharing expertise to have maximum impact. So NERL is a hosted program that we put a lot of attention to the last couple of years, and we've had a good result. And we're going to bring the same attention and mindfulness to all of these global programs. And that's what we're launching. Now, you're going to hear a lot about this later today and tomorrow, but I have to give a huge shout out to NERL. Next slide, please. So this is not supposed to be legible. This is supposed to be illustrative. But you can see this is a list of all the different organizations that are represented in those global programs. And you can see just a wide variety of institutions represented in those programs. And it really is a demonstration of collective action and the wonderful inclusivity represented in those programs. Next slide, please. Okay. So we need to come together now to take stock of where we are. So I talked about phase one, really focusing on the core. Now it's phase two, bylaws, governance, operating system, and really getting a better sort of governance structure or operating system clarity for all of our hosted programs. And when I say that, I mean our area material projects and our global resource network, our AMs, if you will. Now, folks have often said, well, why now? Why would we go through this effort, right? Why should we all go? Why should we be focusing on governance and doing this work? What's the need? Here's the need. So I've broken down the need. So this governance structure that really needs to be modernized. There are three areas that we can address by modernizing our governance: opportunity costs, real costs, and risk. Now, the opportunity cost is that we have these the hosted programs. They all have their own bylaws. They have their own governance structures that have their own capacity demands. They have their own membership dues and structures that have their own invoicing. They have their own, they have needs for infrastructure. I was working with SEAMP, the Slavic group, and they were really talking about infrastructure. We need infrastructure to do our work. These are folks that really have innovative plans for changing Skolcom in a digital environment. They need infrastructure, right? So all of these groups, though, have largely been, as a matter of administration, structure, governance, separate from each other. And then they have this ambiguous relationship with CRL, where we've been trying to suss out, are they independent? Are they not independent? So it's been a bit it's been confusing as a matter of governance. And so the big opportunity cost, the big opportunity is that coming together, we can scale the expertise in these groups to create a unified vision for open access, for infrastructure development, for membership growth, for invoicing, for licensing activities. We can realize much more impact if we work together across the groups and across CRL. Now, the costs, this is the back of office sort of operations. The governance structure, the system design, it separates stakeholder groups. And so labor is often invisible among and between stakeholder groups. And so one thing that you may not be aware of if you're not internal to the operation is how decisions at one part of the system creates volatility and spikes in other parts of the system. And one really good example is invoicing. CRL has a real operational challenge with invoicing. We invoice once a year to 200 plus organizations. And what that means is you send out an invoice once a year, staff changes at the host institution. So it's actually a pretty heavy lift to actually get the invoice to the right place and paid. And then when you have 9 or 10 or 11 or 12 programs, depending on how you count, operating independent membership dues, then you're having hundreds of invoices coming in now that you need to manage back end. And so the back of office costs, the number of touches that introduce elements for risk and mistakes in accounting, both internally at CRL, but then at the host institutions, universities, a lot of these member organizations are getting 12, 13 invoices from CRL in any given year with huge back of office costs, both for CRL and the host institutions. Can't we just have a CRL membership, one membership, just get it, pay it, and then support the programs? But I just want to make visible, we talk about hidden labor, the invisible labor in the accounting department managing the workflows, the volatility spikes is very real and probably invisible. But we need to make that visible so we can have a proper functioning system, an OS. And then risk, I won't talk too much about this because it'll make me sound like a real high level. It'll just make me sound like an administrator, and I'm a collections person at heart. But this is something that's incredibly important. And if I'm being honest, as president, as the board, this is table stakes. What's happening is that when you have ambiguous governance structures, you have a disconnect between where risk is generated, risk, financial risk, licensing risk, legal risk, financial obligations. Risk is being generated in one part of the system that may be incompletely connected to the areas that hold the risk. And so one of the things that we're aware of, and one of the things we're focusing on as a board as we strengthen governance, we just created an audit committee. We're really strengthening all of our financial management. We're really, really giving heightened attention to that. And as we do that, the auditor has identified this weakness in governance as a material weakness in our structures. And as a president and as a board, that is something that we are going to drop everything and focus on. Because what's happening is that there are financial commitments being generated outside of, within an ambiguous governance structure. That's something the auditor has flagged, and I have an obligation. The board has an obligation to close that. We just do. And another area of risk is we have to file a 990 every year. Now, if you're, as you're in an organization, it's probably a different part of campus that files that 990. I signed the 990. And one of the challenges we have with these different programs, running many programs, is that when the payments for a different program crosses over into a different fiscal year, that changes our accounting team's preparation of a 990. And with such a variety of programs and this governance structure that decouples, that makes communication difficult, that makes it very difficult for us to file a 990. So again, I won't talk too much about audit 990, but this governance structure makes it such that as president and as a board, I have to close this. I have a legal and fiduciary obligation to do that, and I'll do it. But really, let's focus on the opportunity costs. Let's focus on the opportunity. Like, I'm a collection, right? So next slide, please. So global collections. This is what CRL does. It is our commitment. You're going to hear a lot about this for the rest of today. You're going to hear a lot about tomorrow. This is where my head is. This is where my heart is. If CRL does anything, it is global collections. And what we've done to really bring the community together, because we all know we're building global collections. We all know we want to build a global equitable knowledge ecosystem. We all know what the strategy is. We all know what the goal is. But the operations, the OS, the structures, How are we designed to do it collectively? That needs to be determined, and we need to do it as a community. And so we're bringing in Educopia to lead us through a process of engagement across our committees. The CSPC committee did a survey a couple of years ago, and the survey came back. CRL is all about international collections. The International Collections Group did a call to action and surveyed members of our AMP groups and global resource programs. And what they said is, we do important work, and we do not feel that senior administration understands our work, and we do not feel that senior administrators are supporting our work. And they're right. And so we want to get there and support that work. I know that's my commitment. And we're going to be talking a lot more later today and tomorrow about the process to come together as a community, whether it's administrators holding risk, whether it's staff that are, making sure the back of office operations work. And most importantly, the representatives from the global programs are centered in the process, first to last, to drive this conversation. And so the Educopia initiative has been deliberately driven to be multi-months of work. It's a high-touch process, but I think it needs to be given the stakeholder groups. Really centered the ICCG committee and the collections committee to take a lead on that. And as we create this, the sprint teams and the choreography for this Educopia work, I'm actively still working now to get members of the AMP groups and the global resources groups on the sprint teams themselves. So really getting the AMPs and the area studies community in a position to meaningfully shape as an active participant all of this work. Again, we're going to talk a lot more about this after the break, but that's the plan. So we can all come together and have a strategy, have app development, have a governance structure, an OS, and an infrastructure that all operates with integrity, right? Top to bottom, all aligned, right? So this year's annual report, the theme was sustainability. Next year's theme is integrity. Integrity, not just in terms of fair dealings and that's important, but integrity, app development or program development, OS, governance, and infrastructure. We want to have those things all aligned so we can have maximum impact as an organization. So next slide, please. So that's the plan. So I came in 2019, 70th anniversary. Next year, we're all going to come here and celebrate in Chicago for the 75th anniversary. And what we have been doing is no less than restructuring CRL so it can be a successful cooperative operating at scale. And we've done it through a couple of phases. Get that strong foundation, even if it was going to cause temporary operational disruptions, but have to have a strong core to build on if we're going to have another 75 years. And now we're in phase two. That's getting the governance and the bylaws and our hosted programs really situated strongly. And that's what we're going to complete in time for our 75th anniversary a year from now. So we are light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm really proud of the team and really appreciate the board's support as we restructure this. This is exciting work. It's difficult work. It's meaningful work. Thank you so much.
If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A box now, and we will share those with Greg to answer.
I appreciate the applause. I really appreciate the applause. And I also welcome hard questions because we're going through transformative change, and that's difficult. And I really believe in just being open and being accountable because I'm really excited about it, but I'm in it every day, and everyone else gets sort of intermittent sort of bits and pieces. So I'm here to answer any questions with the board about any questions folks have.
So again, please use the Q&A box that is separate from the chat box, which is not open at this time. So please use that Q&A box if you have any questions. Our first question, Greg, from Gwen. Did I hear correctly that staff numbers have gone from 67 to 38? If so, can you provide some additional detail about this?
Yeah, Gwen, thank you so much. Yes, we actually have a much smaller staff headcount right now, and part of that was through regular attrition related to COVID. The 50% turnover, but that's not the only. And that's so to the extent it was about turnover. Those are positions we need to staff up. We need to fill some positions. Want to hire a head of collections, global collections. We need to staff that up as quickly as possible. I think we're ready to hire those positions. We just need to get this governance conversation launched so we could fill those positions. But another flavor of that, so part of the answer is that we need to fill some positions. But the other half of that question is that we've outsourced some back office operations. So largely outsourced HR operations and largely outsourced all of our accounting and financial expertise. So we have much greater expertise on staff, if you will, through our outsourced arrangements with an outside financial firm. So we now have a CFO, an accounting, we have CFO, we have a number of accountants, we have a whole team of finance experts, but they're outsourced. So some of that number, Gwen, is that we need to do some hiring. The other part of that number is we've outsourced some core services.
So Eric asks, first thanking you, Greg, for your remarks, and then asks, what can members do to support the vision you have regarding global programs?
Yes, global programs. Thank you so much, Eric. So this is what I need, right? So what we're having is it's a system design issue, right? And so for us to build a really strong system to really invest in global collections, and I'm here to invest, I'm here to double down on global collections, triple down on global collections. But what we need to do this effectively is I need stakeholder groups to come together and develop a shared understanding of what the problem space looks like, or the opportunity space. And this means representatives from the area studies experts or the global studies experts in conversation with CRL staff, and then also in conversation with senior administrators, so that we can all get a sense of the opportunity costs and the holding of risks, so we can design a structure that's going to meet a number of needs. And so right now, one of the challenges, and the board has talked quite a bit about this, is we need more dean engagement and more dean support on this conversation, so that they understand exactly what the changes are that we're making and are really prepared to support it, right? And when I look at that call to action survey that the area studies community or members of our AMPS answered last year, was they really felt that their work was misunderstood or not fully seen by senior administrators. And so I really need the senior administrators to come in and join in this conversation, and so we can have a community level understanding of the challenge space, and then a community level path forward. But so Eric, yeah, I definitely want you as a dean involved, definitely. And I know you have really exciting East Asia collections at University of San Diego. And I know that goes for lots of other groups that may or may not have been involved in the AMPS traditionally. But thank you, Eric. I need you, Eric, and the other deans.
From Julie, she asks, you stated that NERL has a new governance structure. My understanding from the April NERL Program Council meeting is that there is a plan for a new governance structure, but not in fact a new governance structure yet. And the interim NERL Executive Committee has now been sunset. Can you speak to the timeline and process for establishing a new NERL governance structure? Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the NERL Executive Committee is not sunset. We are putting out a call for new members, and I know I'll be at ARL in Denver next week talking with a couple of deans, and there's interest about populating that. But the NERL Executive Committee is not sunset. We just haven't put out. We're updating the charge of the executive committee, and then we're putting out a call for representatives of the executive committee. But the executive committee for NERL is definitely not sunset. We're actually very. That's something I'll be doing as soon as I
Well, as soon as we get through the governance meetings this week, but that's definitely not sunset.
We have a question from Jim, and he asks, regarding global collection, what is your comments on East Asia collection, which faces the concerns on specifically increasing Chinese government censorship and long-term preservation of the digital data?
This is a fantastic question. Thank you so much. So this is core. This is absolutely core. So the information commons, particularly in an East Asian context, what information is available, what information is preserved, reliable, uses evidence. It's absolutely crucial. And so when you look at, and again, I'm gonna bring this back to governance because this is actually the priority that we need to get a handle on this. So when you look at our current governance structure for global programs, now we have that list of groups. We don't have a single group covering Japan, Korea, or China. So when you look at that array of programs, we have a real gap. We don't have an official group that's focused on China, Japan, or Korea. That's not a strategic issue. That's an administrative issue. That's a governance issue. And so one of the things that we need to solve for as we get a stock of all of CRL's global collections programming is how do we have a set of global programs that covers all of the regions we want to cover. And one of the things I've understood is that because we don't have a group covering China, Japan, or Korea, that librarians in East Asian libraries have been trying to use CRL purchase programs and trying to find other avenues to get their work done. But that's folks trying to work around a governance structure rather than the governance structure working with them. But I'll say this, when it comes to, I won't focus on China, I'll focus on any government. Any government that is, we need to have a knowledge ecosystem where there's reliable documentary evidence to hold powers accountable and to also support evidence-based research and advocacy. And we can't do that. That's why research libraries have such a critical need to be active in this space. We can't rely on commercial sector. We can't rely on the government sector. We have us. And so those issues that you outlined are absolutely critical. And we need to get and that's exactly the kind of understanding and questions we need to build into our redesign of all our global programs so that we are administratively positioned to take action on just those kind of issues. Great question.
And we have a question from David. He says, with regard to governance, how to accommodate the distinction between hosted organizations that by definition are serving much wider constituencies, such as open access by charter, and those that are formulated to serve the interest of paid members only?
Yeah, so David, you put your finger on it. You definitely put your finger on it. So when you look at the hosted programs, they have their own memberships and their own membership dues and their own membership constituencies. I share that as observation. That's not a critique by any means. But so these groups are operating. They have their own memberships, their own membership drives. That's all a good thing. It's all but it's been operating separate from CRL membership, and so there's some that creates some administrative overhead. The invoicing that I talked about, the back of office invoicing. It also creates this I would consider a lowercase e existential issue for CRL, in that when deans look at CRL and the cost of CRL membership, there's a really expensive CRL membership, particularly for a large organization like Princeton. You pay a really healthy CRL membership cost share. But then oftentimes senior administrators will get that, but then they'll also get a whole array of other invoices that are CRL related. And they're like, wait a second, I thought we paid an invoice. So I think that this is part of the conversation we need to have as part of the getting together and really saying, okay, what are all these programs that we are totally committed to? But how can we design how do we align all of their activities with CRL's activities, whether it's at the level of invoicing or metadata workflows or digital preservation workflows, but also right down to membership drives and really calibrating that. So that the question that you raised is a central question that we will be exploring as part of this Educopia work. And in fact, the Educopia work, we're going to talk a lot more about this afternoon. There's a 4-part component, and the 4th component is doing a deep dive on just this issue. But David, since you're on the screen, I'll say, in 2019, you asked me, do I support open access initiatives like SAWA? Yes, 100%. And we featured it in the annual report. The idea is, how do we actually situate SAWA to grow and thrive, and how do we create more SAWAs? And I know that some of the renovation we did, the back of office operations, has completely disrupted some operations. That's on me, but it's going to situate us for greater growth going forward. I love SAWA.
That seems like a great note to end on. That's all of our questions today. Thank you all so much for participating. Any final thoughts, Greg?
No, I just want to say that this is a uniquely important organization. It is a cooperative, a true cooperative created by the research community, governed by the research community to be a commons, a real commons. And we'll be talking about this afternoon. I'll be talking about it later, tomorrow. But this organization is incredible. I won't be in my position forever, but I'll be here for, a chunk of time. And I'm doing everything I can to make sure this incredible organization is situated for another 75 years of success. And we're really close, and we're going to celebrate this next year here in Chicago together. Thank you.